Places, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to UNSUNG. This is, 9 now of Season 2, of course. I welcome you all back. I have a fabulous, and I don't know, all my guests are fabulous. But, you know, we've been talking off camera with this gentleman today, and although I worked with him on several occasions and we got some work coming up, it's really just impressed me how we have been able to discourse and dialogue just in a really honest way, even off camera. And I believe that that's going to come here in the next hour that I have with him. What do I got to say about this guy? You know, there's sort of an obscureness, perhaps historically, to him. However, I think he's really starting to find his legs and bring something to this civic scene that in my estimation is as valuable as anything anyone else is doing out there, and probably part of the reason for that is because it involves people. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the guy I know as John Ibrahim. John, how the hell you doing?
I am doing well, thank you very much.
Good.
Pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, sit back, relax, and you too, because like I said with Trish Edwards, we're going deep. We're going deep. Gloves are coming off, and it's going to be great. So, tell us, the people, where do you come from? What's your background? Where are you born? All that kind of good stuff.
I was born in Edmonton, the son of a German war refugee and a Dutch girl whose parents were farmers in Minburn, Alberta. And they got together and started a family and had children and moved to Calgary. And so I grew up in Huntington Hills in Calgary, and my mom was a church organist and a piano player. So, you know, I was forced to take piano lessons, and then joined a band in high school or junior high school and started playing trombone, and you know, went through the Calgary school system, living in a suburb of Huntington Hills, and you know, coming up through our mutual friend Brian Threlasius was running my high school band program, and then you know, and then graduated from high school, went into engineering, but kept playing trombone in the Wednesday night big band, which is still going 30 years later.
Right. What a big, yeah. I mean, who doesn't know the Wednesday night big band? Who's doing that now? Like, who are the
Brian Threlasius is still running it, although he's retired. And it's been like almost every jazz musician in Calgary that I know has played in the Wednesday night big band at some point, either as a member or as a substitute member.
Yeah.
And so it's been a sort of a fixture of semi-professional, you know, big band music in Calgary.
Seems to me like a staple of the city.
It is.
Kind of like Ranchman's, although it went under for a while, but I believe it's back.
I think so, yeah.
The Wednesday night big band, no different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, you know, and it's always been a community-focused, high-quality band putting on music that is, you know, fantastic arrangements of that try to connect with people and, you know, and make people have fun.
So give me the trombone story. Well, where'd that come from?
Actually, it's an interesting thing. I remember when I chose it in grade 7, and it was because it didn't have keys or buttons. It was a continuous slide, continuous intonation instrument, so you could play any note. You weren't restricted to the notes that are in the in the scale. And then in grade 7, I remember George Cooperis, who was a fantastic junior high school band director, was running the program, and he said, and he said, oh, I don't have some other instrument, I need more of this instrument. Same old story, never enough of this instrument, whatever it was. And I said, well, Mr. Coopers, maybe I could play that instrument. And he said, no, you should stay on trombone. You've got trombone player's lips.
Trombone player's lips?
Which I think comes from my little tiny minuscule amount of Indonesian heritage.
What?
My grandfather was born in Indonesia, and he was an Indo, which is Dutch and Indonesian mixed people, much like the Métis in Canada. But he was, there was a society of Indos. He left because his father died, and he ended up back in the Netherlands. But all the Indos were kicked out of Indonesia in the 50s.
Well, now that you say it, you can actually see a little bit of that.
You can.
Isn't that weird that once you say something, it's like if you would have said...
But it's less than 1% on the DNA test, so it's pretty small.
Right, but if you were to say I'm Johnny Depp's cousin, I'd probably immediately go, So, Indonesian.
Yeah, who's the guy who did that song Jump,
Van Halen?
Van Halen,
Yeah.
he's the most famous Indo musician, I think. I think it's him. Should we look it up on the...
Who, Eddie?
Eddie Van Halen
Really?
is Indo, I think.
Oh.
Unless I'm confusing with somebody else. I could be getting it mixed up with somebody
That's okay. That's something to Google tonight.
Yeah, everybody.
Everybody, jump on Google. Everybody Google. That's fantastic. The Indo...
So the big lips, the continuous movement, the microtonality, the ability to play slides and glisses, and I think the limitations of the instrument, and this comes to some other stuff I'm doing with music too, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but the limitations of the instrument, the fact that you can't, you have to move your arm for each note, means you can't do everything with that instrument, which means you're forced to interact with the instrument in a way that respects its abilities. And you're forced to create something together with those limitations.
Right. I feel the same way about the drums. I've never experienced sitting around a campfire and people singing along to a drum set. And so the instrument itself has limitations. And it's always a challenge to take that instrument and the limitations of such and make it work. That's why I think that drummers, can be some of the finest musicians, because they are limited in terms of their harmonic capacity and things like that, although there are harmonics you can produce. Overall, it's a basic rhythm static staccato type of instrument. And so you really have to understand your role as a musician. And God knows I never overplay. But you certainly have to have that in the forefront of your mind.
So what's going to happen, and Gavin doesn't know this yet. What's going to happen is Gavin and I are going to create a brand new product, and it's going to be Gavin and me and another horn player who sings. And it's going to be something new.
Ah, wow.
And it's going to be based on, just watch and see. Predict this is going to come
Ladies
true.
and gentlemen, you, not just as much as I right now, are being fed this information for the very first time. So I look forward to whatever the hell it is he just said. No, that's fantastic. And once again, what would it be that you take a trombone and a drum set and actually try to make music out of those two fucking things? Come on. But wouldn't that be a challenge?
No, we got another horn player. And
Oh.
we're all going to sing.
Okay.
Me.
All right.
A little bit.
Okay, whatever you say, dude. I am all on it. Look, I want to get to you, the man. John Abraham. You and I met several years ago, 10 years ago, probably, if not more. At one point, I even threatened to do your basement.
Gavin Sorokin and Stefano Valdo are
The whole record.
And actually got a good product. The basement looks great. But, you know, you and I have a little bit of history here. I know when you started, you know, you were attempting certain things. You know, you had a certain idea of what you wanted, and you were on a road to getting there, probably personally and collectively, you know, around other musicians and with other musicians. Talk about, let's take it back there and talk about what your ideology was to begin that journey.
Oh, so, well, I mean, the context is, okay, so what Gavin's really talking about is a stage in my life where my kids had gotten older, didn't need so much parenting. My career had stabilized, so it didn't need quite as much attention. And the Wednesday Night Big Band, which we talked about already, which was a fantastic thing, it doesn't, you know, we're playing charts that are amazing arrangements by people like Sammy Nestico. You're going to play what Sammy Nestico told you to play. Your creativity is pretty limited in such a situation, unless you happen to get an 8-bar solo. And let's face it, most of the solos go to the lead tenor player or the second trumpet player. So, you know, so the creativity in that band is somewhat limited. And I'd also, in a strange way, had fallen out of love with jazz. In particular, the jazz that was happening in Calgary at the time. It all seemed to be very virtuoistic and showy and just like, you know, oh, this is very sophisticated music, you know, and you should love it because it's so sophisticated.
Trio, quartet.
Yeah, and just like, you know, what makes this person a good jazz person? Oh, he can play chords way more sophisticatedly and way more complicated and, you know, with a lot more extensions and some, you know, than the next jazz guy, and that somehow made him better than the other jazz guy.
Well, kind of like a post-bop mentality.
Yeah, like way, you know, like how complex can we make this music and expect the audience to still come? And so I'd fallen out of love with jazz, and I was strangely, in a weird way, for some reason, I didn't discover No Doubt, the band, until I was on a business trip in Sacramento. And I'm like, wow, this is great. They're playing like rock music, and these imaginative horn lines, and it's like accessible, and people love it. And it's like, and I'm listening to these CDs, and then I go to the Monterey Jazz Festival, and there's a lot of great musicians at the Monterey Jazz Festival, and everybody's like sitting in the chairs going, oh yeah, that was a good solo, man. Good solo, man. And then the Soul Rebels come out, which is a brass band from New Orleans. And they're playing the Monterey Jazz Festival. And they're the only band that has everybody up on their feet dancing. Every other act at the Monterey Jazz Festival had people sitting in their seats clapping. But the Soul Rebels had people on their feet dancing. And I'm like, oh, they've just got 2 drummers and, you know, a trombone player, trumpet, sax player, you know, a tuba player. I know people like this in Calgary. I could do this, but I'm not from the South. I'm not from New Orleans. I grew up listening to punk and ska and rock and 80s stuff, you know. If I do something like what the Soul Rebels are doing, I'm going to do something like what No Doubt did in the 80s. It's a groundbreaking subgenre that happens inside of, you know, a place called Los Angeles, called Orange County. But it's new and it's different and it's unique and it's got the horns and trombone players are central to it. So I'm not just the second fiddle guy who gets called to, you know, to play this part that's really not that important. You know, the trombone is central to it.
Let me take you back just a little bit. I want to walk this back a little bit because you've said a few really interesting things that I want to touch on. Number one is the sort of post-bop mentality, that, you know, virtuosic sense of playing that I absolutely believe has its place. You know, because I think that musicians themselves should be informative and educational, even if people don't understand it. That people get an idea of greatness, about what it means to, you know, to go above and beyond the general scope of things. So that's how I feel about music like that. That it is the vehicle to inform and to educate a society as to what greatness looks like for the simple purpose, or the simple reason of informing people that they also inhabit that very ability. It just hasn't been vetted, and it hasn't been, masterfully pursued, which takes, that 10,000 to 30,000 hours.
Absolutely. And I think virtuosic music has an appeal to musicians who are trying to learn the music. Doesn't necessarily have an appeal to a bunch of drunk people in a club who are just trying to connect with the other people in the club. And it was a phase of my life. Like, I'd fallen out of love of that. It actually took probably about 7 years. So 2018 is probably when I really started falling back in love with that kind of music, which is so prominent in so many places, including Calgary. But I wanted to do something that was more primal and more emotional, and I think, trying to connect to the audience in a way that makes them move, and connect them through lyrics and emotions that are sincerely delivered, and
Let me stop you for a second, because I just want to go back. Number one, I don't say that about post-bop or, jazz in that sense, at 300 miles per hour, as a sense of judgment, because I understand what you're saying. I'm sure everybody else out there does. I've always thought, from a musician's perspective, there are two types of music that you should listen to. Music that is contextual to your life, and the music that you just love. Whether that's Paul McCartney and the Wings, or or Stravinsky, or it doesn't matter. That second type of music is music that you have to listen to. So that type of music that you get off on and you enjoy is the one type of music, that is cultural, that is meaningful to our experience. The second is the type of music that you have to listen to in order to educate yourself on what is out there and what is outside the scope of your experience. Just like meeting people from different races and cultures and things like that informs, another part of your being. So the post-bop would be there for the educational side of things, and for the general public also to get a sense of what it means to be curated, that I feel that we may have maybe degraded a little bit. But the other type, and that's the type that I know that you really latched onto, which is that intrinsic music, and the part of music that is tribal, that gets everyone together for the sake of community and humanity, and, drunk people aside in a bar, we could discuss that element, but that side of music that connects all of us together.
Well, I think I've been wanting to write some original music, and I had no clue how to write original music. I took this funny songwriting course online for a month from Ryan Treader, who wrote for a lot of pop stars, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Adele. He's a genius songwriter, and he tried to explain how to compose music. And aside from the fact that you can't teach that level of genius, he brought, and it was kind of a dumb course. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but he taught a sequence of music writing, which I think fits into my priorities for music. He starts with the groove, the fundamental beat and sound and feel and tempo. He starts with the tempo and the groove and the feel and and in the chorus usually, but he starts like establishing, I want it to sound like this. Then next he works on the melody, singing gibberish, which may be lyrics that end up in the song, or maybe lyrics that completely disappear from the song. And so the primal part, the most important foundation of the music, is the melody and the groove. And I think so much of the music we're taught, especially people who take music lessons or take music in school or in this classical sort of formal instruction, they don't focus on the groove and the melody. They focus on other aspects of performance, And
Such
such as maybe tone or tempo or accuracy or or inflections in the voice or just like just playing the right notes. Just play the notes that Mozart told you to play. Or keeping the tempo. That's part of groove, I guess. But it's just like if you look at somebody playing something off the sheet music. They're playing the notes that somebody told them to play. They're not focused on the groove and the feel of it, right? Whereas, as far as I can tell, everybody who's running a garage band with no instruction and no formal music education, and they're just getting together with their friends in a community environment, they're mostly trying to imitate the sound and the groove of the music they hear on the radio or on their records. And if you look at where ska came from in Jamaica, or where any sort of music formed, it really comes from that fundamental groove nature of it.
So let me stop you just for a sec. I want to ask you some questions about that. I think that's excuse me, a very interesting concept or ideology, and a very simple one. You and I talked before about bringing it back to the basics. I'd mentioned that to you. And to me, it sounds like this guy, whoever he is, I mean, once again, you hear about Taylor Swift and all these other people. You never really hear about what's underneath that and the genius that comes from that.
Who wrote those songs?
Right, and the genius itself seems very simple to me. However, it's a revelation in simplicity. Because basically what this guy is doing, I think if I'm getting you right, is walking it back to basics. He's taking the foundation of rhythm, which probably is the first instrument necessarily. Before we strummed something that, that was fabricated, we hit something that wasn't fabricated, that just existed in nature. So we're taking it back to that very fundamental element of rhythm.
Well, rhythm and the basic harmony, like a lot of times his groove includes an implied chord progression, like a two-bar progression or a 4-bar progression. So it's the basic groove of the chorus usually, or it could be of the verse, but it's not just the rhythmic groove. It's also the harmonic sort of lilt and feel of the song, and then put the melody on top of that, and that's the hook.
But you
the
could
groove and the hook and the melody, right, and everything else is secondary to that.
Sure, but you could also make an argument for the fact that in nature itself. So let's just say, I mean, I'm fantasizing a little bit here, but maybe for a good reason. So you start out with just playing on a log, right? But as you're playing on the log, you hear this something, outside of yourself in nature that is making this humming sound or this, right? So as you're doing that, you're getting the foundation for both of those things in real time from the elements, natural elements that are around you, and then on top of that comes maybe the construct
Right.
of the entire form of the music
Right.
itself,
Right.
right? But you're starting with those very foundational elements which exist all around you, and then you're expanding on that. Instead of taking a top-down approach, you're taking a bottom-up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just, it was just like instrumental. And then I realized, like, I didn't take this course until last year, but I realized, in a sense, that's what I was trying to achieve with Delirium Street Party Brass, is like this, this emotive feel in the audience, And I was lucky enough, so when I first started this, then I went to New Orleans a couple times, and it's like, and went to Preservation Hall to see the classic jazz, but also just all the street bands, and I realized that in New Orleans, music is fun. Music is well, not always, but there's an emphasis on fun
Based on
in music in New Orleans, right? And you might be the best trumpet player in the world. It doesn't matter how good you are. If it's not fun for the musicians in the audience, it's not going to fly in New Orleans. It doesn't matter how good you are. It has to be fun. And so I think this is what sort of, and then I ended up in Edinburgh on a genealogy trip for my wife's genealogy, and and I ended up at this brew pub in Edinburgh, and they had the Backchat Brass Band show up, and it was just like they were storming the brew pub playing with their brass instruments, and I'm like, and everybody's just grooving to it. And they only played for like 20 minutes, 4 songs, and then they went away and then came back 40 minutes later for another 20 minutes. And people are in the brew pub, they're having fun, they're talking to their friends, they're just having a good time, and then this brass band storms the hall for 20 minutes and leaves. And it's like, the music is moving people. And they didn't even have any lyrics, because it's all just brass band covers of stuff. And so the music is moving people, and
It's that intrinsic sense of celebration that we
Right.
all inhabit. That all we need is somebody to pull that trigger,
Right.
and we're off to the races.
right. But it's not just celebration too. I mean, music can move you in many other ways as well, and I think, it could be a very sad song, but I'm really trying to focus on the vision is really the happy party. It's called Delirium Street Party Brass. It's like a bunch of people dancing in the street and having fun with some drums and horns and,
Right, well, that joyous celebration is
Yeah.
intrinsic in the name that you've given
Right.
the band. But
Right.
I'm going to walk you back a little bit to New Orleans. So from Edinburgh, Scotland, we're going back to New Orleans. I want to talk to you about, because you're right. I lived a number of years in Baton Rouge,
I saw
very close to New Orleans, and so I made my way to New Orleans on many occasions. Never got there for Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras, and I
okay.
wish I would have.
No,
But
it's better off just the normal.
I know,
flow.
stay out.
Yeah.
Nah, I wanted some beads.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you were discussing that sort of second line concept, which to me is pervasive, of course, in New Orleans music. That had 2 elements to it. Because the funeral dirge was based on part of the second line concept. And if you hearken back to Live and Let Die, do you remember the scene? And I'll explain it. So many people remember this scene. There's a scene where the guy's on the street corner in New Orleans, right? Roger Moore, right? Starred in the movie. And there's this band going by, just this liturgical dirge of music. And the guy's standing on the street corner, and this guy comes up to him, and they're carrying a coffin. And the guy says, "What's going on? What's the sad music about?" And the guy goes, "Oh, somebody died." And the guy looks at him and he said, "Who died?" And the guy looks back. He says, "You." And he stabs him. Right? The guy falls down, and they come over with the coffin, pick him up, and then the music changes. Everything's celebration. But that is intrinsic, so that duality of pain, suffering, death, it sort of superimposed with the element of rejoicing is both necessary, I think, as our struggle as human beings, as our human nature. So I think in your band in particular, there are elements of both, no? What is your take on that intrinsicness of music having both elements, the duality of darkness versus light?
I think, well, we talked earlier off camera, How Music Works by David Byrne is a book I read a few years ago, and it influenced me quite a bit. So I don't think music exists outside of the context that it's performed in. Music has many roles and many purposes, and it happens. Even the same music on a CD is different than the same music on a streaming platform versus performed in a church or performed in a club or performed in a theater. The music is part and parcel of of the environment that it's in. And I think, it supports our emotions regardless of where we are. I used to play a lot of church music, and brass, trombone fits well into a church environment. And you're playing funerals, you're playing Easter celebrations, you're playing Good Friday, and all that sort of, music supports people's spirituality. But I think the spirituality that I most want to support with music is the spirituality that occurs when people are partying and moving and having fun together. with their friends, you know, and just like that's where music's, you know, that's the kind of music that I want to focus on the most right now, I think.
Right. The struggling is a part of us. It's a part of our nature. But so is the rejoicing.
Yes. But I want to focus on the rejoicing as much. For my contribution.
I get it.
Yeah.
That you know, that's what's interesting. We talked a little bit about this, you know, and you mentioned to me that, well, you can't do everything.
Right.
And I totally agree. You know, we talked about, you know, the sad fact that I may not be able to help somebody in the Ukraine or Russia right now, struggling or whatever, but I can do this.
Right.
This is my contribution.
Right.
This is where I feel like I do, hopefully, well, I know intrinsically, I try to do my best work. And so this is the influence I can have.
And I think one of the things that I listen to, and I think a lot of jazz musicians do this, I listen to a lot of rock and roll, I listen to a lot of punk, I listen to a lot of ska, and meanwhile I'm playing in the Wednesday night big band, you know, and it's a bipolar existence in a sense, right? Because one's very sophisticated jazz music, you know, it's pretty fantastic, but it doesn't match with the music I'm listening to. The music I'm performing was separate from the music I was listening to. Rock and roll, rock and roll, what is it? It's a sort of a primal dance kind of music, right? And invented in, 50s and 60s, you know, perfected maybe by the Beatles, I don't know, whatever. But it's this thing that's so fantastic. And, you know, and it's gone through some iterations over the years, but it never sort of, to me, rock and roll became a little bit tired because it's like, come on, we've been doing bass, drums, guitar, vocals since the 50s. You know, how much more can we milk out of this quartet? You know, aren't we done with this? But meanwhile, you know, the music I'm performing is not at all what I'm listening to, and it's like, what I need to do is take these worlds together. I need to take the rock world, which frankly most of the musicians I know have no clue about because they're classically trained in a university environment. They haven't lived rock and roll. I need to take this rock world, which I've been trying to figure out. I've been trying to figure out for 40 years, you know, but I've been trying to like take the people I know who play drums and horns and wind instruments and take these people and like merge it with the primal music of rock and roll. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is get these things together. And what I realized is that, wait a minute, I've actually, you know, in 2011, there weren't too many people doing it, but what I realized is that kind of the Soul Rebels had done it because they'd taken the New Orleans street band and put in sort of hip hop stuff. And in the 80s in Orange County, they'd taken the Jamaican ska music and merged it with rock and roll and put horns in it. And that had happened already. And then I realized that the British in Scotland and England, they had some of these brass bands that had existed for hundreds of years as these colliery brass bands. They had taken their music to the pubs and turned it into something more primal. And then I realized that in Eastern Europe, there's this tradition of heavily entertaining street brass bands that are very, very, very audience focused and you know, energetic. And so I realized that these things had been happening a little bit around the world in different ways, but that hadn't been happening in Calgary, and hadn't been happening to the way I wanted it to happen either. So that was kind of your vision, right? Yes.
In a nutshell, was your experience and your observance
right.
of all this great music that was touching you, for lack of a better term, and something that you wanted to express, and you were on a journey to observe and also gain the information as you observed of this being done out in the real world.
Right. Shuffle Demons had been, so I realized fairly recently, is I used to listen to the Shuffle Demons a lot when I was in my 20s and 30s, and they had actually been doing something very similar in Toronto, 30 years ago. And, so it's not like this hadn't been done before, but let's take these things let's take these things and combine them together in a new way that hopefully is entertaining and imaginative and is focused on people in a room together, just experiencing it, and it's not tired, it's not same old, and it's something unique yet familiar and fresh, and it's bringing people, musicians and fans and just random people together.
You and I, again, were talking about that necessity for us as people to create music as a community, as a group of individuals. That doesn't mean that a group over there and a group over here, lots of groups. But we were talking about that whole, and we were using Drake as an example, but there are lots of examples of this, of how music, popular music, perhaps, has become very individualistic and very focused on, and centered on the self. I want to walk that back a little bit, because you said that maybe rock or the four-piece band was starting to wane, was starting to, maybe had its day, it was becoming tired, I think was the term you used. And I would like to just delve into that a little more, maybe even see where we get to with that. Because, I'll also say that this show, it exists for every sense of reason. It's sort of like, a musical Sesame Street, like these are the people in your neighborhood. It's maybe a little part Joe Rogan. Did he say Joe Rogan? Yes, he did. Don't judge me. There are many elements of this podcast that I'm doing that I find very important and very necessary. Part of this is a thought experiment. Part of this is when somebody says something, I like to take that as a thought experiment and think about it. So I'm going to pose this to you and just give me your feelings. I have I haven't defined a position on this, but do you think that rock and roll was getting tired? I mean, rock and roll is basically just a form of music. It's an expression of music and done in a certain way, right? That's all classical is, in a sense, in every form of music. But was it that form of music was getting tired, or was an industry getting tired? Was an industry becoming restless? Was a society changing that necessarily was moving from one thing into another?
I think you mentioned Drake, and I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift. I think music, there was an opportunity to change music. There was an opportunity to change music, to free it from its confines, to take one person to be the figurehead, like the top of the, like just the imagery of it, like the head of state, the president or the queen or something,
So are you saying, sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, are you saying centralizing?
No, not really. I'm saying let's create a product that hundreds of people can contribute to, and that has this amazing, it's been assembled from the best people that we can find, and if we need somebody to play, handpan, we'll bring in the best handpan player to Los Angeles, to the studio, to play these 15 notes on handpan, because hey, we're doing a Taylor Swift album. Not that Taylor Swift has handpan, I don't know, but whatever. We are able to bring in people to create this product. And it could be, the best people in the world create this product. And then let's market it as in the imagery of the lead singer. And it doesn't detract from the product that it's been marketed in the imagery of the lead singer. It's still just as good of a product. It's an amazing product. It's been created with all this amazing stuff, and it's designed to be fed to you on the radio or through Spotify streaming or through some video that you see, and we shouldn't, so that pop music has freed itself from the guitar, bass, drums, vocal, foundation of rock.
Okay,
Pop music has gone beyond that four-piece ensemble, and it's become something that's created in the studio with computers and marketed around the lead singer. And I love some of that stuff. I think some of that stuff is absolutely amazing.
Oh, I wouldn't disagree, but let me
But I
argue the
think-
point.
The point is, my point,
Yeah.
is that music, you should listen to that on your headphones while you're cleaning the house, or while you're going for a jog, or maybe you watch it on your computer on YouTube or whatever. That's fine. It's an amazing product. You should appreciate it for what it is. But when you're going out, it's with your friends. Let's experience something that real musicians create in the moment, that moves you, that isn't created in a studio by flying some guy in from London to play handpan. It's created in the moment with the people that you can gather together in the room with you.
Okay.
And-
Right. So the gathering together, i.e., a concert environment, is something that people should experience.
Right.
But let me ask you a question. There's so many ways to go here. It's almost endless, because I project as the people watching this, as you people at home watching this right now, and the questions you might have, or the ways that you might argue the point. And so what do you think about that centralized component?
I think there's a fundamental disconnect now between recorded music and live music, and I think there always has been a disconnect, but it's been masked. Somebody like the Beach Boys could go into the Los Angeles studio and record a song and get the Wrecking Crew to play it, because they weren't very good musicians and they hadn't practiced it yet, so they didn't play on their own records. But they could go in and record with those fantastic LA studio musicians and create a product, and then they could go on the road with that product and deliver it in a kind of the same way, in a way that the audience appreciated that. And I think it's time, and that we don't try to pretend those are the same thing. A recorded song is no longer, it's created by people with computers in a studio. It's not, if you want to see a concert of that's great. It's a visual spectacle. It's not even really, to me, I don't even know if I'd call it a concert. I would go to it, maybe, definitely, especially if there's good dancers. I love dancers. If the lead singer is singing to a recorded backing track and she's got fantastic dancers, yeah, sure, I'll like that. But that's a stage performance that's synced to the studio song that's been released. Whereas real music, live music, is, let's just separate them. Let's not try to take them together. And the songs we've recorded, and Gavin's played on, my latest EP, that's an interesting thing, because, I'm trying to be genuine. I'm trying to be genuine to the performance that people would hear, which I like listening to our EP, Gavin. I think it's... You do? I do. I listened to it the other day, and I think, this is a really good listening thing. But but it's not the same as it's never gonna be the same as what comes out of, the $1 million computers with the studios, the studio guys with all their samples. It's a different product, and it can be recorded, but when it's recorded, it's a facsimile of what you would appreciate, what you would see live, and it's a teaser for what you might see live. Whereas when the current crop of top pop stars go on tour, they're giving you a visual representation of what they recorded in the studio. There's a fundamental difference. I'm trying to reproduce on stage as best as possible what we were able to achieve in the studio, versus our album is I'm trying to record as best as possible a facsimile of what you would experience live if you came and saw the band.
Right, and to that extent, you know, like I've done a lot of records in over the span of my life, and I've always tried to bring that live element into the studio. So
Right.
there are elements of my playing. Number one, I always
Yeah, why don't you give up on that? They're separate things.
I guess it was just it's an ideology that I
Right.
have. The fact that I feel it's necessary to not bring static product to bear to a market. That music is something so far beyond that. I'm not going to debate whether product is necessary or not necessary. I'm not going to go there. What I will say is that I've always felt that there is a raw, earthy nature to what may be being snapshotted for posterity, and that itself has to have the elements of the earth, of, you know what I mean, eating dirt, of that live performance. And I've also always gone into the studio, at least as a potential, without agenda, a potential of playing something that hadn't necessarily been played on a record before.
Right.
At least maybe in this genre. So when I did some country records, I added some fills that you wouldn't necessarily hear on a country record. Still contextual, still push the music forward, did not get in the way of anything vocal. And so it's my desire to push those boundaries. That's who I think I am as a human being. Someone who pushes the boundaries, who asks questions more than just goes along with the narrative. And I can't help that. I feel it's intrinsic to me. And I think that's what you're saying with your recording.
But I'm saying that we need to get people back out experiencing live music for real and give them an experience that they will never experience listening to a recorded product. We need to. I think there's an opportunity now to just separate recorded music from live music and say, you know, if you're out and about, if you want to have a good time in Calgary, you know, come see this music that, you know, you can get an idea of what it's like from a recording, but you're never going to have that connection listening to it in your home.
Okay,
because
but
this music is not designed, you know, because I think the state of recording and the state of popular music and the state of, you know, has pushed the quality of pop music in a sense so high that it's a completely different product than what you can deliver live. And I don't think, you know, I just think we should let go of trying to connect in one sense. In one sense, I think we should let go of the connection between what people have been able to achieve in the studio versus what we can deliver live. But in another sense, the people in the studio aren't constrained by the standard set of musicians that a rock band have. They can grab samples from anywhere. You know, I have a membership from Splice. I can download 67,000 samples for, you know, less than it's 10 cents each. You know, so, you know, but in a live performance, here's where I need you and the other 4 percussionists in the band to, like, okay, what kind of sounds can we make when we hit things? You know, how can we hit things in ways that bring different sounds to the live, to the live show? And how can a trombone or a saxophone or a trumpet, you know, make a different kind of sound that connects to people? And this is where I think, you know, we've also learned from the people doing this pop music that we can, you know, we don't have to be constrained by what we were taught in high school about how a trombone should sound. You know, or what we've heard people do on Stravinsky albums or Miles Davis albums. You know, let's do our own thing, but let's make it this primal connection. You know, and that's part of the reason why we don't have a drum kit in the band. It's like the drum kit. Once you put a drum kit in, people just expect it to sound like a drum kit. Like, right. let's have 4 percussionists or 5 percussionists, and let's see what kind of thing we can make happen that's, new and fresh and a little bit different, but still got that primal kind of groove. And then let's layer on the harmonies on top of that and try to connect with people,
I want to get to that. Because look, I'll tell you what, the possibilities are endless, you're right. I mean, with what we have with computers now, and sounds and samples and everything else, the possibilities are limitless. We have a lot at our disposal. But, and you and I talked about this before we came on, and I introduced, I think, a thought to you. And I want to talk about that. And that thought is that it feels to me, I get a sense in my humanity, all right, I'm going to strip away all the possibilities of samples at the moment and what music can be. It seems to me that the world itself at this moment is experiencing a, for lack of a better term, a shedding of its skin from every part of our humanity and from what we call the world. It is happening in all four corners. And in every discipline and in every facet that we exist in necessarily, it seems like the threads are unraveling. And what I mean by that is the historical constructs or the historical foundations that we have necessarily set up for ourselves as a humanity, as a people, and the questioning of that foundation and the pursuance of perhaps a more equitable way of doing things. Now, when I say that, when I relate that to music, it is that what I think you're saying at the foundation of everything you're saying, that we get back to live music. Now, let me, because I know you want to answer that quickly, let me preface it with this. And that is, I understand recording. I understand that it should exist. You're goddamn right it should. More, as much as live. But what we're seeing is kind of a denigration of live. We're seeing that, and hey, I don't give a shit about A rooms, B rooms, C rooms, but if we go back to the 70s, there is a pure argument that could be made for more music on a civic level happening there than there is today. Simple. I don't think that needs to be debated. It's kind of a truth. And the whole thing is that we are missing the experience of really being together.
One of the things that Calgary has, and I've traveled quite a bit, and I think it's better in Calgary than most places, is we have a jam scene. And we have tremendous opportunities for people to just get out and play with other musicians. And, and I'm, I think one of the most wonderful community things that happens in Calgary is this Rockin' for Dollars on Wednesday nights at Broken City, where it's really a full band open mic and 8 to 10 bands show up and play 3 songs. And it's usually themed, maybe it's themed after it covers Britney Spears is May 28th or May 18th, if that's the next one I know of that has a theme. And so every band will do a cover of one Britney song, but they'll do 2 other songs that are their own. And it brings people to, it's the most amazing thing, and it brings people together in a room playing music, making music. I think one of the things I'm trying to do is, that is happening with young people playing rock or punk, in a certain type of room. And most of the musicians that you and I would know are not participating in that, right? And I think this is a community disconnect between the grassroots rock scene and what we can do, what the musicians that you and I mostly know are doing. And I think, I want to connect those. I think the community music scene is strong in Calgary. There's so many big bands in Calgary. There's got to be more big bands per capita in Calgary than any other place, as far as I can tell. And this is just people playing trumpet, trombone, saxophone, bass drums, guitar, piano, for fun in a community environment. You know, this is what, you know, we have this in Calgary, you know, and so I don't think we have less community. I don't know, I wasn't really playing much in the 70s, but you know.
You said to me before the show that how many neighbors do you know now?
Right.
And I said, I don't know fucking anybody. I don't know anybody around here. And we remembered the 70s and the 60s. And I'm not being antiquated here. I'm not saying this for posterity's sake. I'm not saying that, oh my God, I got to get back to what was. No. I understand that there is a newness, that there is a shedding of skin perhaps. Well, I don't know why it actually sheds its fucking skin, and I should look that up. I should Google that. But there is a necessity for it in nature, and that's why it happens. And it seems to me that that's what's happening now. And I really want to have that conversation, because that conversation leads to new skin. And that, I guess, is good for the snake, and it can't be any fucking worse for us.
But the reason why it's a street party brass band is because if we're playing, you know, if we were playing a block away with a brass band, you know, with drums and tuba and trombones and trumpet, even if you didn't see the announcement in the community newspaper, you might hear it. And you might walk over there and you might hear us playing in your neighborhood. And guess what? You're going to start talking to the people who are beside you. And you're going to get to know some of your neighbors because you walked out to hear this brass band together. And, you know, and I think music has that ability to bring people together. And I've recently, so I went to Ireland a couple of years ago and spent some time listening to traditional Irish music in traditional Irish pubs. And it's the most amazing thing. I mean, for the most part, there are people playing the same songs for 200 years, and they haven't changed them for 200 years, and they're just playing them the same way they've played them for 200 years. There's no effort to try to change the tradition. And for the most part, they're playing them at the front of the pub when you walk in. And so you walk in and you experience this music a little bit, but a good portion of the people in the pub walk away from the band and actually aren't listening to the band. And so they're drinking with their friends at the back of the bar, not even listening to the music. And as a musician in Calgary, that would be embarrassing because people are not listening to the music. My music is not good enough to make people listen to it. But what I realized in Ireland is no, they're still there because of the music. They came to that pub because that pub is playing the music that touches their soul. And if they're if they're drinking with their friends and having a conversation about life with their neighbors, and the music is in the background, that is also okay. And that is also valuable because the music is why they're there, and the music is permeating their existence.
And I guess
that only works if there's a groove to the music. Like, it can't be some esoteric fancy thing. It's got to be sort of a pulsating Irish lilt, you know, that.
It seems to me like there's a fine line in what you're saying, and I'll explain what I mean. What I mean is that it could be taken as a publicity tool or a tool. The band could be out front to draw people into the club. Now, that could be just a propagation tool for the club, you know what I mean, so that they can get people in and treat the musicians like they don't necessarily matter, because that's part of what you supposed when you were watching band or thinking about this. But when you walked in, you realized, no, this is the soundtrack to the lives of the people inside the bar, creating dialogue. That dialogue that, once again, I mentioned to you, in the 50s, 60s, we talked about science, we talked about fucking vaccinations, we talked about everything. And why? Because we didn't need to be experts. We were close to, we were in proximity of politics and science. We all felt like we had a voice. Now, God forbid we fucking mention what we think about science. Why? We always did. We always talked about scientists. We knew we didn't have to be scientists. So what you're saying is that music is a part of that culture. It is the soundtrack to the lives of the people, having valuable conversations about life and art and music and politics and religion and everything inside the club itself.
And in Edinburgh, the brass band, you know, Backchat Brass, but there's lots of bands, Fat Cat Brass, and there's another one. In Edinburgh, in the club, the band will come out and just interrupt your conversation for 20 minutes and play 4 songs to get you amped up. And then they'll go away, and then you can continue your conversation. But in Ireland, in the traditional pubs, you know, it's more of a continuous, this is the music we've been listening to for 300 years. We're still listening to the same music. I was watching, last time I was, one of the last clubs I went to when I was in Ireland last time was, there was a dozen people intently watching the band, and maybe another 80 who were sort of not really watching the band. But a musician comes in with her child on her lap and pulls out her, I think she was a flute player, and pulls out her flute and just joins in for a couple of songs. And then says, well, I gotta leave because, you know, I gotta pick up my other child or wherever she had to leave. And so, and that kind of music just flows and ebbs, and it's part of society. And I think, you know, music is, one way or another, should be the soundtrack of our lives. And I think live music can do that much better than recorded music. In my mind, recorded music is actually now better to be listened to in isolation in your headphones at home, you know, or in the car while you're driving by yourself, where you can focus on the music, you know. But in the rest of your life, hopefully we can have more live music.
If anything, you've strengthened, like I said before, what I believe as the two fundamental types of music. And those are, whether we call it the soundtrack of our lives, or the music that is in context to the civilization that we inhabit. There is that. And then there is also maybe the soft seat, the place where people actually come in to listen to that music because it is informative, inspiring, educational, and it also provides us an experience. But here's the problem, is that just as you and I are talking, there is so much shit to unravel here that we can't do it in one aspect. So I want to have you back. Because really, dude, and I don't mean this to blow smoke up your ass, there are so many underlying currents here that this isn't a one-shot deal. So I'm sorry. You'll have to make room for me again, and make room for the people that I think...
What's the sequel going to be about, Gavin?
I don't know, The Reckonings, you know. Jean Ibrahim 2, The Reckoning. I don't know. We'll see what that's about. But, brother, this might sound like blowing smoke up your ass, but I'm going to say it anyway. I get the sense from you that what you care about is the civic, is really the town you're in. I mean, once again, I had Trish Edwards on here, and you guys, I mean, if you guys aren't checking that out, check it the fuck out. It's actually pretty good. And one thing that she said is, Gavin, I don't care about, because I read off the list of shit that they do, you know, everything from major concert halls and tours and international this and that. She said, Gavin, I need to focus on here. This geography,
right.
The geography in which I inhabit. And it seems to me like civically, you give a shit.
Absolutely. And I've traveled to a lot of places, as I mentioned several times. There's of the places that I've traveled to that I've been impressed with musically, in the sense that I feel Calgary could aspire to, there are two: Toronto and New Orleans. Every place else I've been to, I've realized this isn't as good musically as what's happening in Calgary. Calgary, especially on a per capita basis.
That's why I'm doing this podcast, is because the foundation is us. Dude, I mean, you have mattered. The things that have come out of your mouth, I hope people are watching, because I think they are true. I think they're honest. They have a sense of humility to them. And I think that that's a good place to come from. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching this. And once again, as much as I've had John and I've had Mike Clark on and I've had a lot of people on, this is a show for you, and I want all of you to come on because you all have a voice. You all have something to say. And I want you to say it. I really do. I'm putting together a town hall right now that is about all of us. It's a place for all of us to get together and to speak to the truths, I think, that John brought forth today. that we really do have a voice. How much more can I say that? I can't convince you of it. You have to be convinced of it yourself. You do have a voice. We all have a voice. And collectively, I think we can do something. And holy shit, that might actually be exciting and not draining. Might actually be a good thing. So I love you all. Be well. I'm coming at you next week. And until then, just love, man, and accept. All right? Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Man, that was so good. Just so honest and